today we have our very first expert interview.
I just started saying yes to gigs coming my way, not really knowing what I was doing as a photographer, but really leaning on my film school background to get myself through. The work started to grow very rapidly. The more I put myself in in these high pressure situations, I started feeling more confident in my ability to deliver.
Do you remember what your first paid photo gig was?
The first that I put out in the world is this one I just showed you guys before you started, which is a photo of Mayor Hawthorne. This is an atrocious photo for me. Had never shot a concert before. I was shooting for a local publication. They paid me to go out and take pictures, kind of pixelated. The colors are muddy. And what I realized was how much I didn't know about shooting concert photography. I go back to this photo sometimes because the images that I put out today are leagues better. And it's good to kind of track your process. It's good to go back and see where you started. And when you're kind of feel like you have imposter syndrome, which is very real when you're working as a professional and you're trying to compete with other people, it's good to remember that, you know, what things look like before so that you can kind of get that passion and drive again to keep pushing yourself further and further. But through getting good at music, I started getting hired for weddings because music fans that are very like at every concert in the Bay Area, or I would see them a lot, and they came to know my photography as a concert photographer. They started asking me to shoot their weddings. They wanted a rock photographer to shoot their wedding, you know? And I was like, well, hell, I've never done that before, but why not? Once you start in it, people start to kind of ask you just how wide your experience is. And that's where you can start to pick up other things outside of that one. So some people only do weddings or engagements and weddings. But if you want, you can actually have quite a wide variety of gigs you pick up professionally. But you just always have to, because people will ask, you do concerts, you do weddings. If you do weddings, then they're going to ask you if you do baby photos. If you do baby photos, do you do product photography? And you can really ride that wave as far as you want. And so that's kind of the trajectory for me. It's just being introduced to musicians when I was young, shooting projects for them, then being happy with the product, and then latching onto me as their photographer. And then over the years, introducing me to other musicians as a professional, personable, trustworthy photographer that they can use. Bedside manner, right, as a doctor is so important. Being a personable, trustworthy individual as a photographer is extremely important. People, especially people that are famous or people, or just let's think couples that are getting married, they're trusting you with something very important.
Yeah,
they want to feel comfortable around you. They don't know who you actually are. So if you can make them feel comfortable with who you are before the wedding day, and they can feel comfortable and calm when you're around, you get to capture way more intimate photos of them because you've established this warmth in that they're trusting you on something. If you can make them feel like they can trust you the day of, they're going to trust you, and you're going to capture much better images because they're willing to be much more vulnerable in front of the lens. Every opportunity that you get to spend with the couple to establish connection with them allows you to grow closer with them. And then the day of the wedding, which is the most important, they feel so much calmer and collected around you, and they're way more willing to listen to your direction. If you can create calm where you can direct them how you want them, but keep them in that moment, that's so key in capturing unique, vulnerable, intimate moments, especially with like newlyweds.
I'm looking at some of your like portraiture, and I'm not sure, like a lot of them seem like they're musicians that you're doing their like portraits for. Like what's your like process for coming up with those images? Like some of them, it's more of just like a headshot in a studio. They're just dressed with nice lighting. Other of them, it's like in an interesting setting that you've chosen.
I think my goal in my career is to, some of my heroes, my photography heroes are your Ann Leibovitz of the world that are working with musicians, but they're out there taking iconic images, that they're working with an artist to create, they're staging the scene. So to get there though, it's like you need to be confident in what you're doing when it comes to portraiture. And for me, this is actually a shoot I did just to get better. This wasn't someone hired me. That's a friend of mine, Chelsea. She's had these awesome Coca-Cola shorts that I knew about. I wanted to go into the photo studio. And when we were talking about what she could possibly wear, I was like, hey, wear the Coca-Cola shorts. I'm going to come up with just something simple, but we'll get a bunch of like Mexican Coke bottles. I think we could do something fun. It was a good practice in working with someone and giving them direction, someone that doesn't often do this, staging it, like working and that. And I think we came up with some really fun like images. But for me, it was just a matter of, hey, if this is the direction that I want to go, if I want to be working with musicians and doing really like thought out, really get myself and my like creativity on the image, like I'm going to need to practice that. And so that's what I did. So this is a perfect example of going to the studio and just doing this just to get better. We also did some things like this, where we changed the backdrop, had different friends come in as models. But yeah, it was something that like, this isn't something I was paid for, but this is something that will help me get paid in the future. It's funny. Sometimes you have an idea in your head and you think you have to light the hell out of it. And then sometimes you realize taking light away actually gives you what you want. And a perfect example is this one, which came from the same night of shooting. I was wanting something dark and moody like this. And I kept trying to overlight it. I kept introducing so many lights to try to get it right. And it just wasn't doing it. And I realized what happened was one of my strobes, I started taking lights away. And then I had one light and the other strobe, I had two on her, but one of the strobes didn't fire. And I realized like, oh, I'm just overlighting the hell out of this. This is a one light shoot. I'm getting everything I want off the one. So why complicate it? There's an art form to street photography. And there's a respect that you have to have if you're taking street photography. I walked by this guy. I was like, man, that guy with those freaking clothes on in front of that wall with that seat. I was like, I love this. Like I walked by him and I just was like, oh, I don't know. And then this is in Cuba, and this freaking tour bus rolls up and all of these tourists come off the bus and they're standing right there. And I could tell that they all were kind of like, and like, luckily, thank God, I think this guy would never have let me take his picture if they all went over and took his photo. But it's just, there's the amateur photographer, and there's nothing wrong with being amateur photographer, but amateur photographers lose sense of themselves in the world around them because they're so excited to take images while they're traveling. But if you're taking images of other people, it can be really like off-putting for them. It can be like breach some serious cultural differences. I walked away and I was like, man, I want to capture this image. And so I walked back and I decided I'm just going to ask and be okay with whatever answer it was. In my broken Spanish, what you can't see is on the left over here, there's a window and his daughter was in the window, who's probably like in her 40s. And in my broken Spanish asked if I could take this picture, but he didn't quite understand me. And she did. And she laughed. She asked him and he said, of course. And he just like throws this thumbs up. But I love shooting people that are older. Personally, I think I love capturing older subjects. I think they carry such great stories in their eyes and whatnot in their presence. But yeah, this one is a fun one for me because I love the colors. It really reminds me of my time in Cuba. It definitely like just brings up that that idea of being a photographer in the world and just kind of the challenges of getting good images, but also like being like, aware. There's the questions involved with photography, and there's like a lot of like self-awareness that you have to have. So this one I come back to because I'm glad that I went up and asked permission, and I got such a warm reception about it, So I don't put a lot of stock in having 50,000 followers. I'm sure that obviously that's definitely an eye-popping thing. You have 200,000 followers as a photographer. I'm sure that clients look at that, and then some people put a lot of stock in that. That's not been my trajectory. I don't like being on social media more than I have to. I certainly don't like trying to build my Instagram page out to have more followers or tag the right thing. I'm not interested in that. That's not photography. That's business, but I'm not I'm a terrible businessman, a photographer, right? I've not had to worry too much about that because the people that I do connect with and the clients that I have worked with have done a really good job of putting my name out there amongst their community and keeping me busy that way.